Welcome to the 12th District, ladies and gentlemen. This is Kerry Condata for NCW Life. Another week has passed us by and a major event has happened in Olympia. Of course, we're talking about Initiative 1648, the turn-in on Friday, July 5th, and we're going to tell you all about it. An historic day for sure. But first, we're going to catch up with an old friend that we haven't seen for a while. His name's John Weiss. You probably remember him. He's been a co-host on this show. He was a candidate for Senate in this state. He's done a lot with agriculture. Well, he's doing a lot more right now. So when we return, we're going to catch up with John Weiss and find out exactly what he is doing and what his new position is. Pretty exciting stuff. And then followed up by what happened with Initiative 1648. Pretty spectacular stuff. We'll be right back with the rest of the 12th District. Welcome back. Well, it's nice to see John Weiss doing what he does best, working with the agricultural community. We wish him the best. We'll check in with him from time to time to see how he's doing. Well, now the final conclusion of the great race to get Initiative 1648 on the ballot. Let's start from the beginning and tell you how this all came about, because it is really quite a story and it has been quite an interesting ride for the last 35 days, as documented on this show and others. It's been statewide, actually, with news across the state. But let's talk about how it all got started. Back in the beginning, lawmakers at the end of the session decided at the last minute, in the middle of the night, with the galleries closed at times, to vote for tax packages that totaled $27 billion over 10 years, 11 new taxes, some targeted at specific industries, but most of them just an overall padding of a budget that went up 17%. I think that's a record for a one biennium increase. Way more than what was necessary, but they seemed to feel it was. But they did this in the darkness of night, and it didn't make people very, very happy. And so there was a groundswell, I would say, of energy of what to do about it. And Tim Eyman had filed an initiative at 1648 way back before the session started, thinking that this could happen and thinking that he might have the answer to that situation by repealing all those taxes and putting a limit on any further taxes moving forward. Well, when this came up, Mike McKee, a small businessman from here in Wenatchee, thought that might be a great idea and launched a Facebook page called Eastern Washington for I-1648. Well, within a very short period of time, even a day or two, people from Western Washington were chiming in saying they wanted to be a part of this. And it turned to Washington for I-1648, and thousands of people joined up. It got the attention of several media sources, including John Carlson on KVI 570, Kirby Wilbur, KVI 570, and Saul Spady from KTTH. We even had Lars Larson from clear down in the southwest corner of the state talking about this particular initiative. Now, with that said, there was some warnings from friends that I knew, people that were policy experts in Olympia, that said, well, this is really questionable whether it's constitutional or not. There's a good chance it will get thrown out. Well, the way momentum was going, the way people were so enthusiastic, we thought it might be worth the effort to give it a try. And if it was thrown out, we'd back it up potentially with another initiative, or someone would back it up with another initiative later on. And so that was the plan going forward. Well, the growth was tremendous. The energy was tremendous. The radio folks came on board, and suddenly we're over 10,000 people in less than a month. And it kind of took on a course of its own. In the end, we found out that there were some flaws in the system. One is delivery of petitions. We had a ton of people signing. The mail got to be a little bit on the late side. Mail was coming in late and light. So we tried something that no one's tried before. It was called the Last Dash, where we put 9 or 10 drivers across the state to physically pick up the petitions. This was in the very last day on July 5th. This is the day we've all been waiting for. Initiatives, or I should say signatures, were coming in at a fairly rapid rate, but not as well as we expected in the mail. We knew there was some issues with that, so the physical delivery became the method used to try to do this. Now let's regroup for just a minute. To do this in 35 days, you have to get about 10,000 signatures a day. Now, that was a daunting task to start with. There's no question about it. But again, worth the effort. And if nothing else, we were going to educate people about what happened in the session. Well, we did. And they came, and they really got to that point. I think in the last few days, we probably were hitting that 10,000 a day. But frankly, folks, it just ran out of time. It just flat ran out of time. And when all was said and done, the last dash was very successful across Washington. We stopped at a number of places. My route took me from starting in Walmart up to Leavenworth, over to Index, down to Monroe, down to Woodinville, and then off to Bellevue, South Center, and then to Olympia. Now, as we got closer and closer to population centers, the groups of people got larger and larger until we arrived at South Center, where there was a whole parking lot full of people, literally some that wanted to sign and some that simply wanted to hand us a pile of petitions. And I mean piles of petitions came in from all over the state on this last dash. And so by the time we arrived in Olympia, at the Secretary of State's office, we had some amazing counting to do. We hadn't anticipated this. We've been counting every day the stuff that came in the mail. I should say our crew, the crew on the website had been counting all these signatures. And the fact is, these were overwhelming, the number that came in physically. So we rented a room at a local hotel, got an entire crew in there, and started counting. Well, I got to tell you, they were still counting at 4 o'clock. The turn-in deadline is 5 o'clock on the 5th, and at 4 o'clock, folks were still counting petitions. That's how many came in towards the end, and that's why we know that time was really the problem. I suspect there are still tens of thousands of signatures out there that did not get counted or got mailed late or just simply couldn't find their way to Olympia. This is part of the pitfalls of having a 35-day program. But we learned along the way. In the end, we probably hit a pace closer to 4,000 or 5,000 a day, which is pretty amazing considering no money, no publicity outside of grassroots and Facebook and a few radio stations. And we came up short of the 200,000 line that we had drawn in the sand. We knew that anything short of 200,000 would not get us over the line regardless of what happened in the coming days. So it takes about 322,000 turned in to get to generally 260,000 valid signatures. Obviously, we didn't quite get there. But in the process, we certainly lit up a lot of folks, educated a lot of folks, and had a really interesting time getting a feel for where Washington's at. I don't think there's any doubt that people are very concerned about the direction this state is going. We've watched California, we've watched Oregon, and now Washington slip into this very high tax, accelerating government mode that certainly will have problems in the long run. And I think people are very aware of it. I also believe that people are a little tired of seeing higher fees and higher taxes every time they turn around. And it just means that their money doesn't go quite as far for their own use, and it's getting very taxing on a lot of folks. Last but not least, the people that were most invested in this, that really came to play, were the small business folks that I talk about so often on this show. They are under tremendous pressure from all the new programs, from paid family leave to paid sick leave to coming up on a new high minimum wage in January. It'll be $13.50, and they cannot take any more pressure. The big guys, they can spread it around, they can do things. We've talked about this a lot, but the little guys are coming to an end of the train if we do not back off small business, both in the regulatory sense and in taxation. I don't think there'll be a lot of small independent businesses left in the state of Washington. So there you have it, quite a monumental 35 days, a little short of the mark, but an amazing journey for me, for Mike McKee and others. And I've got to tell you, I would do it again. Even though it wasn't successful, it was a lot of fun, and we might do it again. Right now, we're going to pivot with this group to a referendum called Referendum 88. This is about another bill that was pushed through in the last few minutes. We'll come back and tell you a little more about it. And we're going to tell you more about that in general next week on the show. We'll be right back to wrap it up. Welcome back to the 12th District. Well, I've been trying to track down one of our co-hosts for some time now. We kept promising we'd have him on to give us an update on Washington, D.C. It turns out that he's been in Washington, D.C. and is now back with a new job. I'd like to welcome aboard today John Wise from his new office in Spokane, Washington. John, what the heck have you been up to?
Well, Kerry, it's good to be with you, and good to be with the viewers there in the Wenatchee Valley again for NCW Live. I have been working in Spokane since the 10th of June. I have been working with the administration and others on various issues, and potential came up to be the State Farm Service Agency director with Senator Brian Danzel, who was the director, getting a promotion to the regional area and overseeing FSA, NRCS, and RMA, which are all important to the Central Valley there. And with his promotion, this job came open, and I was appointed by the president and the secretary on June 10th. So I now work in Spokane and oversee the Farm Service Agency for the state and various offices.
Well, okay, tell us a little bit about what FSA does. Now, you talked about 3 different groups there. You are the FSA group. It's Kirk Pearson,
Yes.
is a friend of mine too. He's in another group, right?
Yep, Kirk Pearson, a former senator, is Rural Development Authority. He is actually working with me to host an event here soon in Pend Oreille County that he's going to bring all of the appointees from the state together to talk about how we as the various agencies can help farmers, help people in the housing and development, within the natural resource and conservation. So he's a great man to work with, and he's my counterpart. He's in Olympia, so he's on the west side and I'm on the east side. But the Farm Service Agency, we oversee like the crop program, CRP, the LIP program, which is a cattle program, and livestock indemnity program. When there's natural disasters like the fires we had in the 2014-15, and then there in Chelan, we have various different farm programs that handle natural disaster and the ECP programs. Then we also have a division that's the farm loan program. And we work with farmers and ranchers and beginning farmers and ranchers to offer loans so that they can do operating loans, equipment loans, and do various different farming functions that are necessary.
Now, will this require you to go back to Washington, D.C. from time to time, or are you in Spokane most of the time?
I'm sure that the job will take me to Washington, D.C. still sometimes, but so far I got hired on the 10th of June, and I wanted to get a grasp of what was happening in agriculture across the state. So I have been scheduling visits to the offices that FSA has. We have offices all over the state, from Clark County to Skagit to Walla Walla to Okanagan to Wenatchee, East, Waterville. So I'm trying to go out and meet all the staff, find out what their needs are, how we can better serve the farmers and ranchers of the area. We have a very good administration right now with President Trump and Secretary Perdue. And Secretary Perdue is really focused on agriculture, and he has done a lot of good things. We're getting ready to implement the new Farm Bill, which will be part of the task that we are given. And with the Secretary Perdue, what we're finding is this is a man who wants to get the yes. There are, we want to do as much as we can for our farmers and ranchers, and we want to get the yes quickly. There will be some times that we don't get to a yes, but it's a great approach from an administration that is getting back to its roots.
Well, John, tell us in general, I know you're somewhat restricted on things you can talk about, so we won't wander too far into the weeds here, but tell us a little bit about the general state of farming in Washington State. In general, and also as far as this year goes, how do you see things playing out for the rest of this year?
Well, I think agriculture has been off to a good start. The weather patterns obviously are the biggest concern that we have. We had that big hot the weather was warm to begin with as the wheat was growing, so we want to watch that very carefully. As you saw yesterday, from what I heard, the Wenatchee Valley just got a huge rainstorm. So with those cherries growing right now, rain isn't, you want that to stay away. So we got to see where that goes. But it appears that there's a good market for all of our commodities right now. We'll see how things come through the year and look into August when harvest time comes, where we end up. But so far it seems to be going well in the growing regions, and we're not hearing a lot of challenges from our farmers here at FSA yet, because they're still in the middle of growing.
Well, I got to tell you, the farmers I talk to have been very concerned about the regulatory climate in the previous administration. I understand under this administration, some of those regulations may be coming down a bit. Is it going to get easier to farm? I know it's never easy, but is this administration doing things that is going to make it easier to get these crops grown and to market?
I believe so. I mean, I wouldn't have taken this position if I didn't believe that that's what they were going to do, and I didn't believe in what the agency was doing or the president was doing in helping our farmers. I do believe that they have taken a giant step forward in the approach to regulations. You've seen that over the lifetime of the president and President Trump. He has reduced more regulations, I believe, than any other president, but at the same time protecting the environment and protecting the waterways and water. He's just done a good job all the way around, but I do believe we will see that, yes.
Well, water is certainly a big concern. We are talking about this state of drought that Governor Inslee put in place. How do you feel about the water situation moving forward? Is this just a temporary situation, or is this a concern moving forward?
Well, obviously, drought is a concern as you watch through it. FSA has its own monitoring program that we utilize with NRCS to monitor drought. I have not been here long enough to know where we stand with that procedures and those designations from the FSA, but we have a magnificent staff across the state of Washington with FSA. The people are hard workers, they're dedicated, and they're here to help the farmers, and they're monitoring that closely. And that's one thing I'll find out more about as I go to the offices.
Well, John, it sounds like a challenging job running the entire state. You say you have a lot of offices, a lot of staff. I certainly wish you well. Is there anything else you'd like to tell our viewers before we move on? Of course, we'd like you to stop back from time to time and tell us how it's going. But I think it's really sounds like an interesting job, and certainly a great connection for you coming from the farming community.
Yeah, it's been a great fit. Like the staff here has been phenomenal. It's been great to come on board. We do a lot of outreach from FSA, so you offering the opportunity to come back, we definitely will. And as we do the Farm Bill implementation, so we can tell your viewers how that's going and what's going on with the Farm Bill. So I'll be in Wenatchee, I think July 15th. We have a big Farm Bill training session for all our staff, so I might be able to stop and see you then too.
Well, that'd be terrific. I can't go away without mentioning Dan Newhouse. It seems like he's doing a great job for the 4th District. I know that he was probably instrumental in that Farm Bill, I would assume, but are you connecting with Dan as often as you can?
I reached out to his office just to say hello to them in my new position, and they will be here in Spokane for some other meetings shortly, and we're going to get together and visit. So I've reached out to all the offices, the congressional office, just to introduce myself. I had to call Derek Sanderson, the Director of Agriculture, and let him know that I was in the new position, and he's just great. He's excited that I'm here. And then I'll continue the outreach to all ag associations across the state because we'll be working with them all. So big task ahead, but I'm looking forward to it.
Well, John, we're glad you're there. We're glad you're going to be assisting our agricultural community, which is certainly important to the 12th District. And we thank you for taking the time today. We'll see you soon, maybe in Wenatchee, but take care.
All right. Thank you. You guys have a good day.
Thanks. All right. Well, there you have it. John Wise in the administration now in the FSA. I can't think of a better person to be talking about and helping agriculture. That's terrific. We'll be right back with the 12th District. Well, that's about it for today's show, folks. It has been quite a ride the last 35 days. Thanks for sticking with us and keeping track. We're going to move on from here. Next week, we're going to talk about the next pivot point, which is R88. Let's take a quick look at what that's all about. Many, many years ago, there was a policy called affirmative action that was being used to basically diversify workforce, particularly in government programs and construction programs. And frankly, it was having some very negative effects. frankly, pushing the cost of doing business up much higher and pushing the cost of government much higher because the lowest bid in these projects was not accepted. It was the most diverse workforce that was accepted. Therefore, folks with a very diverse workforce could actually charge quite a bit more. It was also difficult, and more difficult now, with the current workforce to attract that diversity and put together a project that would qualify. So it had a lot of inefficiencies. It really didn't reach what it was intended to do, and it's really quite outdated. But someone decided they wanted it back. So they put it in an initiative form, Initiative 1000. They spent a lot of money getting the signatures to send it to the legislature. This was an initiative to the legislature that went before the legislature, and it sat there. Now remember, an initiative to the legislature has a couple of three options. They could have passed that along and put it on the ballot in the fall of next year, or they could put up an alternative to it that would go on the ballot with it, or they could simply just pass it as is. Well, time went on through the session. It did not pass. It did not pass. There was not a lot of talk about it. And right at the end of the session, they decided to do option 3 and put it into law. Therefore, no one got to vote, and it would not be on the ballot in the fall. I am very concerned about that personally because I think it's a very bad policy. But beyond that, why did they do that at the last minute? Why was it pushed through? Well, the polls showed that in a vote, it would probably lose. They did some polling, and certainly enough, most people realize that affirmative action is a policy of the past, no longer necessary, and certainly not efficient, and actually creates a reverse discrimination situation and probably, continues to persist the racial issue when we don't really need to do that. So they pushed it through. It will become effective soon. And what these folks did, R88 is a referendum to put it back on the ballot. Basically says we should vote. And we'll have more information on that particular group. We have pivoted this group, Washington for I-1648 is now pivoted to helping these folks get signatures. Now, their climb is a lot different because a referendum requires half as many votes as an initiative, so they only need about 175,000. They have a very organized group doing it. They started earlier than we did, and we think they have a good chance of getting it done. Check it out, R88, it's all over the web, and we will be trying our best to follow that up to the July 27th cutoff. If they have the signatures, then people will get to vote on R88. We'll be talking more about affirmative action on the next show. Well, speaking of that next show, we're going to get back to some news. We've been so busy with this program that we have not explored the news. We'll tell you, get you a quick update on everything that's happening in politics. Also, we want to revisit the Democrat polls now for the Democrat candidates for president because, frankly, after the debates, things did change. Things moved. And different candidates rose, different candidates fall. We'll talk about our own Jay Inslee and his situation, but that'll all be on next week's show. All right. Well, we want to thank you for listening. Thank you for following our progress on this mission of 1648. We now think that another approach may be more feasible moving forward. We'll see. We'll tell you how those developments go in the near future. I don't think anybody's given up on getting a handle on Washington state government before it gets a handle on us. This is Kerry Condata for NCW Life. This is the 12th District. We'll return next week with more news and some more information on affirmative action. Thanks for joining us.